So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Brain Food for the Curious short talks at lunchtime. Just so you are aware, these are actually standing as our New York State History Month lectures. New York State History Month was supposed to be designated in October. It's actually November, but the legislature didn't vote on it completely, so we kind of jumped the gun. So we are setting a precedent this year. So hopefully next year it will be in October. Next week we will have a lecture by Brad Utter titled "Take a Tour on the Grand Erie Canal in the 1820s." And then the following week we will have our arts curator Karen Quinn talking about the historic Woodstock Art Colony exhibition, which will be opening up right across the hallway on November 10th. So, but today we have an unusual presenter, unusual because Kara Chambers, who's been on our staff for 11 years, is a collections technician, and we're thrilled that she wanted to present this lecture today. And I think it came about because when you're in collections and you don't have a lot of space, you have to move things around and find new spaces and make the storage work. And she came across this fantastic collection called the Science Survey Collection. So I believe those are the basis of most of her materials, which are fantastic. So I'm happy to introduce Kara Chambers and the wonders of the New York State Museum. Kara?
This is a topic that I'm really thrilled to be able to share with everyone today, and more people are coming in. That's fantastic. My interest in museums started long before I started working here 11 years ago. It's actually what I went to school for, so that's pretty awesome. When I began here, I was working full-time in our facility out in Rotterdam, and as you see, we had these pictures on the wall which immediately drew my attention because I knew from my academic studies exactly what I was looking at, which is a classic typology museum, and then finding out, oh, this was, quote, the old museum when it was in the SUD building. My mind was just kind of blown. So as an institution, we do a pretty good job of knowing, having an institutional memory. We decorate our hallways and offices upstairs with panels from past exhibits. We do this not only to make the plain white walls a little bit more interesting, but because we care about our history. It reminds us of where we've come from and how we got to where we are now. Most of the photos you're going to be seeing after this, like Jennifer said, came from what we call the Science Service Collection, which it's kind of complicated what it is made up of, but it's a lot of photos that seem to have come from the publications office. So they're from most of the 1950s. So a lot of the photos from this collection are of the old museum. We all of us here who have worked here or visited here have nuggets of history of this place in our heads from our own experiences and stories that we've heard. Walking around the halls and talking to Ralph and John and everyone else who has worked here for any period of time. We all have these stories and this institutional knowledge in our heads. It doesn't go away. So because of that, we try and document the best we can. Ralph Ratul and John Pasquini for the past 10 years or so have been doing an oral history in which they interview past staff members about their experiences here and document it that way. Our publication, which ran from 2005 to 2008, called Legacy, had these little, look backs to the State Museum. So we have this interest in where we came from and how we got here. Attempts have been made to, you know, publish little things throughout our history, but the middle one is this, but it's 31 pages and it's about that size, so it doesn't quite cover everything. I also cannot cover everything in less than 20 minutes, so if you want more information about our our 19th century beginnings, the website does a really good job of covering that, so I'm gonna just fast forward through our 3 homes. Our first was Geological Hall, which was dedicated in 1854, and that was the home of the State Museum until the State Ed building was dedicated in 1906. The museum was dedicated, the building was dedicated in 1912, and then this building, which opened to the public in 1976. Millions of people have come through our doors in all 3 of those homes. We have educated millions of New Yorkers and visitors, educators. We have shaped the lives of school children, families, all of that. We've had, this is also part of an ongoing research project into the State Museum, and one of the files I have is just a running list of names of staff, it's well over 200 to 300 people, and trying to figure out who they were, what did they do. It's an onerous, and it's been going on for, well, this specific project has been going on for well over a year, and it's one of those fun long-term projects. So one of the things that I'm going to focus on specifically in this collection, and really I just wanted a good excuse to show you all these really cool pictures. I'm a fan of pictures. When we look at pictures such as these, we see, as I said before, typical example of a typology museum, which is rather than, well, it's assemblages. It's trying to exhibit as much of a collection as possible, all in one place. The idea behind this, it can get technical into the museum studies part of it, which I was just reading about this morning, so I have those things in my head too. It was more designed to be a museum of reference rather than a museum for education. There was, in the 19th century, it goes back to the idea there was this relationship between knowledge and display, that these objects inherently had knowledge. You could be educated by them just by them being displayed like this. These are photos of Zoology Hall, and one thing that we can see with the history of the State Museum, it is truly the history of museums. They go from a typology to something like this, which is more interpretive. These are the kind of style of exhibits that we have now, where we have not just objects, but objects and panels and dioramas to inform the visitor. It's before and after. The same was also done in Paleontology Hall, which I didn't realize until I was actually putting this talk together. You can look at these pictures hundreds and hundreds of times and still find new details. The renovation of Zoology Hall, which took place in about the mid-1950s, it was very easy to see a before and after. Putting this talk together, I was looking, trying to figure out what photos I wanted, and as I looked through, oh, they did a renovation of Paleontology Hall as well. I totally didn't realize that until this was very helpful. So the side-by-side, really it gives you an idea of the changes that occurred. Our history is a bit of a puzzle. How am I doing that time?
10 minutes.
Oh, wow, cool. Talking fast. Our history, the history of the museum, it's a really interesting research project because it's a bit of a puzzle. This happens as I'm talking with Carl Marone, who does the tours of the Ed building, and Ralph and John. All of us individually have little special parts of the museum that we have knowledge of, and we don't really find out these bits until we talk to each other. Sometimes that can happen just walking around the halls trying to take a break, and then we find out, hey, I found this new thing, let me share it with you. So this collaborative effort is really what's needed for a project like this. Our history is everywhere: publications, photos, brochures. I was just talking with Cecile Kowalski as hi, and you just told me about a brochure of the life groups in the Ed building that I never knew existed.
I asked Carl to look in my files for it.
That's awesome. And that's how I'm finding a lot of the stuff. People are going through their files. Nancy Kelly found not only extra copies of NAHO that I didn't have. Where's Nancy? Okay. But also newsletters that were internal to the museum. Museum News, Associate News was an external thing, kind of like Legacy. But Museum News, it was done by the staff, for the staff, but that's when we find out when people came, when people left, because that kind of thing is in our heads. It's like, oh, when did so-and-so retire? And I think they retired about then, but our brains are pretty fallible. I try and put a lot of information up here, and then getting it out is a bit difficult. So finding things like that, I mean, it not only documents that, but it documents temporary exhibits. The dinosaurs exhibit is a favorite of mine because that's one of my first memories of this place. And the dinosaurs weren't as cool as I remember. They were a little clunky from what I've been told. So if any of you who work here have anything in your files that you'd like to share, this is my contact information. I'd be more than happy to scan it, give it back, or I've done a lot of, Pat Kernan gave me, she had some photos of the biology staff, so now I have a chunk of information not only from the 1950s about the photos of the staff, but the 1990s. So it's a lot of piecemeal, it's putting together a really big, complicated puzzle with really tiny pieces and a lot of blue sky. So it's a process to get as much information as I can, and not get overwhelmed by it. And in case you're wondering where my title came from, when I was first coming across, kind of going through the Science Service collection, my initial attempt was, I need to catalog this because it hasn't been cataloged yet. I open a box of scrapbooks and I'm greeted with this on top of the box. So that amused me a lot. The Knickerbocker News did a series of articles titled Wonders of the State Museum in the late 40s and 50s, and that scrapbook is a part of that series. I have a lot of people to thank, as I said, this project isn't possible by just one person going into an archive. I'm actually helping create a bit of an archive. Another project that I've been working on for quite a few years is the former staff files of our history staff, and going through those with someone from the state archives after they we're sending some files to the archives. I'm finding bits of information that are useful for my project as well. So there are a lot of people, and I know I left people out. There are people that I've just kind of practice this with didn't get their names in because I had to be super, super early. So that's all I got. Questions? Yeah? Yeah.
What do you hope is the ultimate, product of all of this?
My hope is to, there's definitely multiple writing projects possible in here. I would like to write a history of the museum. But in order to get to that, I see other little projects, more presentations like this I've been putting it off as much as possible to put the word out to the public that this is going on and I'm looking for information. Because I know that can be a snowball effect. So I want to do more presentations like this. I want, there have been talks about doing, little displays here and there. So write about it and get this information out because there are people that, I interviewed, I had a visit with a former staff member, Ted White, who's in his 90s, and he's one of the last people who worked at the old museum. So there are people dying out, unfortunately. So I want to get as much information as I can. Yes?
The state library failed to produce a bicentennial history, but that might be, that would give it another 17 years to work on it.
It's funny you say that because depending on what year you focus on, we as a museum began in 1870. That's when we were, collectively, as a museum. So I can go with the 1870 date. I can go with the 1835 date, which was the beginning of the geological survey. So I have a couple dates I can play with if I want to go that route. It's definitely been on my mind. Anyone else? Yeah.
Can we look at the picture of the staff from the 50s again?
Absolutely. That is
Over some of them.
yeah. Actually, let's just start from the beginning because it really is half the fun. My office, I have one of those cubicle walls, and it's just plastered with photos.
Do you know how many of those people are?
Charles Adams, Winifred Goldring, Rudolph Ruderman. These ladies in front were secretaries. That might be. This one is easy. Utah, he was the director. Whitney, assistant director. That's Winifred again. Ted Way. I have this, and if
Charlie Gillette.
oh yes,
Yeah.
there he is. Luckily, I've shown this to other people so they can help. And I do have I have all of my photos on a Google Drive, so I can share this with a lot of people, so I can get other minds on things. And I do have a copy of this photo that is labeled. It's just not all labeled in my mind right now. But yeah, these photos are great. This was actually a retirement dinner for, I want to say that's Clinton Kilfoyle, but I don't think that's right because I think, maybe it is then. But anyway, it was a retirement dinner. Maybe I can do it at Clinton Hotel. Actually,
Karen, can you go to the one before this, because he needs to be pulling a mask, and somebody's got,
On the right hand side.
on the right hand side,
Yeah,
somebody's
yeah.
going up.
oh yes. That's it. Funny. It's funny. It's something again, the whole looking at these photos a million times and you don't notice things. Yeah, I don't know, but
He's holding a medicine mask, yeah.
judging by the eyebrows, it kind of looks like him, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
There's a story there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's lots and lots of stories.
That's why I like doing that.
Gillette again.
Yeah, some of the stuff are really easy to pick out in the photos because people like Charlie Gillette, has his own uniform, bow tie, horn glasses. Other times it's like they're white guys balding and they're in suits. After all, they're John Broden. He started out as a geologist and he was a director from. He was the museum director at one point. These are all images from copies of Naho, which I have. I think I have a complete run of now, and even these have a lot of really great images. You don't really find Dave LaPlante.
Rick Clark, yeah.
Rick Clark, thank you. I have that photo labeled somewhere else.
Pretty sure it's
Yep.
there.
It is.
Stefan.
Period.
These photos I actually found, and Nancy, in your staff.
Got a lot of staff pictures.
Yeah, that's definitely on my to-do list.
It's not going anywhere.
Excellent, that's what I like to hear. So, it's, like I said, it's an ongoing project. I've been working on it for over a year. I don't anticipate it being done anytime soon, so it's an upside.
Maybe you should do an update next year, Karen, like what you've learned from now.
Oh, absolutely. I've been actually, I shouldn't tell people this, but I'm thinking about doing a blog. Now I actually have to do it. Yeah.
Do it.
You didn't hear that. It's like I learned a lot of things when I had my visit with Ted Way, which is thanks to Jeff Stringer. And that's where I learned, so this photo, which I wish I had the full size. This is a stage photo. You can't really see it, but they're digging up a tusk. And there's somebody else marking out a grid. And Ted told me, it's like, I just staged that for a photo thing for a publication, and he said it ended up in like science journals. Anyone with any archaeological knowledge knows it's like, okay, they're not dirty, they're not sweaty and uncomfortable. This is not accurate. And I have 2 brochures with 4 plans of the old museum, and that is all I've found so far. The museum was in the Ed building for over 60 years, so I know there's other stuff out there. This one I bought off of eBay for like $5. So this information is out there, it's just not all in one place. And this one I find interesting because those of us in history will notice there's a lack of something. And one of the things that I found in a memo, there was a portion of time in the 50s and 60s, I'm not exactly sure of the date range, where there was pretty much no history collections on display. And that goes into the whole how, because history wasn't always part of the museum, it used to be part of what eventually became the archive, so it wasn't actually part of the museum. It's a really complicated story, so it's just nice to look at. Any more questions? I'm just kind of rambling and talking about cool stuff.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I don't want you to tell me how old you are or anything, but did you ever visit that firsthand?
No, the museum in my memory is this museum, is this in this building.
You're a child.
I know.
Or I'm an old guy, one or the other.
Whatever you feel comfortable with, I won't judge.
I'll go with you being a child.
Okay. I've worked here since I was 8, how's that?
Perfect.
Excellent.
Let's see, you're 12 now.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you've never been to the Amber Museum of Natural History up in Greenville,
Oh, yeah.
you have to go. It's a gem of a place, and it's in the
There's a handful of museums that still kind of have that typology, setup. Specifically the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, England, but also the Mutter, down in Philadelphia. And again, it has the old, these are all handmade wooden cases, glass, lots and lots of glass. And those of you who haven't been to the fifth floor of the Ed building, or as they now call it, HR, there are skylights, which none of these photos really show, I don't think. So there was a lot of natural light coming into those halls, which is great in some respects, except for those of us who are into preservation, light is bad.
But the skylights were painted over.
Really?
Yeah, during World War II.
I believe.
Yes.
Because when I worked there, they were black.
Oh.
Same reason ones in the Capitol
So
were
you
covered.
have some that show skylights, and so they predate, obviously,
That helped.
that
No,
time frame.
that actually helps. We, they're not shown here, but I have photos from Banner Hall, which I'm able to date because we know when we got the banners. It was after the World's Fair in 39-40. So even in those, you can see that there's a lot of natural light. So that's.
So there was no natural light when I worked there. It was, those skylights were black. They were
That's
painted over.
That's interesting. There's a couple of these that, one of the other things I want to do is okay, because the physical photo of this doesn't have a date, but I've seen this photo in other publications with a date, so I need to match things up and, get all of my information in one place someday. That's a really good piece of information to know, and that's the whole collaborative thing about it. You talk to different people and you find out stuff that you never know.
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say,